Hi, my name is Ishan Raval, and in this video I'm going to give an outline or a summary of my essay Mungo, the link to which is in the description. In my introductory video, I had outlined the overall objective, the big objective of this project, of both the writing and the videos that are accompanying them. This objective, in a word, was to find out what is the good. The good with a big G, even though all the letters are big in this text over here. But I qualified that question, or I made it precise also last time by framing that in terms of non-instrumentality or intrinsic value. So the question of the good, to ask what is the good, is to ask what is it that we want to exist for its own sake? What is it that is of value, not because it's good for something else, but because it is itself what is good, because it has intrinsic value, because it bears the good itself. So that's what we're trying to figure out in this project. And the reason why I think that's important, I also talked about this last time, is because if there is something that is truly good, then society should be based on and oriented around that. But today, and in my first proper essay of Vichara, my newsletter, in this essay, I am starting to develop what the good really might be. And for that, the first thing where we can start to look at that is looking at possible contenders for the good. Now, without going into too much detail, there are various things that we might find to have intrinsic value, from amazing works of art to amazing landscapes or natural phenomena, to just people whom we love, whom we find amazing, whether those are people that we know ourselves and we are, people whom we love, our close ones, or people that we admire but whom we don't know, say great sports stars or other great personalities, other figures of the world. That can also, apart from such grand cases of what the good might be or where it might be located, we also consider very ordinary things about our existence to be good as well. And I go into an example in the longer version of this video and in the essay, the written essay, that I really think helps explain the broader points that I view throughout, but I won't get into that right now. But overall, we find things like acts of kindness towards strangers, respect, honor, service, the fact of people getting along or of harmonious social relationships, the experience of harmonious social relationships, and the experience of love in general, success in even a more modest life of just having a decent life with dignity and your basic needs met, seeing other people have that basic level of dignity. These are all things that we might consider to be like, yeah, this doesn't have to exist for something else. It is itself good. So what among these is actually good? Oh, in the previous list, I forgot to mention a very important one, which is basically physical sensations that feel good, or not even necessarily physical sensations, but just the pure experience of some kind of pleasurable experience, which often sort of the exemplary case might be physical pleasure. So which of these is really good? Now, to qualify that, we can separate all of these things into, so we're going to use two sorts of tools to sort of clarify these questions further, or two conceptual demarcations. One of them is between states and facts, or the subjective and the objective. So things might either be, so all things, we can, at least in our sort of immediate colloquial experience, as it were, we find them to be either objective or subjective. The objective is things that can be seen from, say, a third-person point of view, or from the point of view of the universe, whereas the subjective is basically experience itself, first-person experience. The first person is the state of some experience, whereas the third person involves seeing something for the fact of it, and that might be also seeing something, experience for the fact of it, but it's to take a sort of detached perspective towards it, a third-person perspective towards it. So that's one. The other sort of chisel we're using is that between necessary and sufficient conditions. A necessary condition is when something has to be there as a condition for something else. Whereas a sufficient condition is something that, if it's there, then that something else is guaranteed. That's all that is required. Okay, so now based on these two sorts of conceptual clarifications, we can go from our list of all the various things that are good to 4 questions that we can ask to sort of streamline our inquiry into what is the good. These are, is positive subjectivity, so good experience, is that sufficient? Second, is positive subjectivity necessary? Is positive objectivity, things that we can see from a third person's perspective, is that sufficient for there to be, then there's that, nothing else is required? Or is it necessary, that it has to be there whenever there's the good? Those are 4 questions. Now, among those 4, before I get to that, actually, so those 4 actually reduce into 2 further questions. One of them is I just said is 3 or 4 times in a row. I'm aware of that, quite aware of that. Is positive subjectivity sufficient, or is positive objectivity necessary? Now, those are corresponding conditions. If positive subjectivity is not sufficient, basically if feeling good is not enough, if some positive experience is not enough, then something else is necessary for there to be the good. What might that something else be? It has to be something from the objective realm, and it has to be something good, so positive. Because the entire domain of reality, in this sort of dichotomy, perhaps false, that we tend to construct, everything is either subjective or objective. So if the subjective positivity is not enough, then it must be that some kind of objective positivity is also needed. And the counterpart to that is that if positive objectivity is not enough, if it's not sufficient, then there's also needed some positive subjectivity in that case. So those are really the 2 questions that we're examining today, that I really went into in depth in this essay. Now, between those 2, the idea of the good that we tend to work with in our present society is that of positive subjectivity being sufficient for the good. In a world, in brief, we tend to think, as modern liberal inhabitants of the world, that individual happiness or well-being is the be-all and end-all of the good. Now, we're sort of fish in water to this, to the extent that the idea that happiness or well-being is what makes for the good, we might find that obvious, but this is a contingent philosophical standpoint that we tend to hold, and that isn't necessarily even what people in traditional societies, or in some pockets of traditional societies that still exist today, what they have believed or what they still do believe. But this emphasis on individual happiness, on feeling good, however one might define it, might include bare sort of shallow physical pleasures, might include highbrow pleasures, might include time spent with people, sort of deep happiness, might include pain and struggle to accomplish something. However you might define it, if it makes you happy, then that it's fine. That flies, because your happiness, an individual's happiness or well-being, is ultimately what is good. That's the conception of the good that is given to us. Is that true? Is positive subjectivity sufficient, or is positive objectivity also necessary? And I won't get into the full reasoning for the answer that I have, but in short, no, positive subjectivity is not enough. We tend to have our entire collective and individual existences organized and oriented around a false God. I get into this with the example of masturbation, as it happens. I think that is a quintessential case through which the insufficiency of positive subjectivity can be seen, and the necessity of something mattering in the world, something having value, in the objective realm of things, something having a positive objective correlate is necessary for us to feel overall good about something. Like pure positive experience, pure pleasure is not enough. We don't think that that is good enough. So what is that positive objective correlate? The dominant conception at least says that, okay, happiness or well-being is what is good. What is it that is good of an objective kind? Now, we're not getting to the answer to that today in terms of what is the definitive attribute, substance, or form of the objective side of the good, but we are today in this essay getting into just two things that tend to show up when we find something to be objectively good, that is good in a third person's perspective. And I, again, won't go too deep into these. Do read the essay if you're interested in all of this. But we tend to find things rare in a certain way. They stand out. There's something special about things that we find good from a third person point of view, whether that's amazing works of art or amazing champion human beings or even people whom we love that we just consider to be such a gem of a person. And there's something rare. So there's a quantitative aspect. There's also a qualitative aspect, which is the rarefied. There's a qualitative aspect of like something about the structure, function, and even the experience and information, subjective things that can be seen from a third person's perspective. All of those things have something rarefied about them. And again, I go deeper into this in either the long version of this video or in the written essay itself. But those are sorts of things that through which we can start to get at what is the objective component of the good. But if the objective component is necessary and the subjective component is insufficient, that raises a question: is the subjective component, is a subjective component even necessary at all? Or is positive objectivity, things that can be seen for the fact of them being good, is that sufficient? Is that all that's necessary? Which takes us to this question: is positive objectivity sufficient, or is positive subjectivity necessary? We saw that pleasure or just plain positive experience is not enough. But is there a part for subjectivity, for the experiential side of things at all when it comes to good? Is it necessary, or is that just sort of besides the point? The answer is, again, I go into this with an example of zombies, in fact, philosophical zombies. There's a distinction in the video essay and the written essay, but no, it's not sufficient for there just to be objectivity that is nice. There also has to be a positive subjective component. And overall, the picture that we have is that neither things that are good from a third person's perspective, things that can be seen for the fact of them, nor nice experiences, neither of those are sufficient for the good. But there is something from the objective side that seems to have value and something from the subjective side that seems to have value. Both are necessary for whatever the good is. So that's all that I have today. Really going deeper into what the good is, really fleshing that out for its definitive attributes or substances or forms in future videos. In fact, the next one we'll be going deeper into what the subjective attributes to the good actually are, if not just pleasure, if not just feeling good in general. If that isn't enough, what is existence in a first person sense oriented towards the good? That's what we'll be talking about next time. So stay tuned. If you found this interesting, do definitely check out the video essay or the written essay. Links to that are in the description. Oh God, I can't believe I'm gonna say this. Like, subscribe, share. That really is necessary, not sufficient, but necessary for the success of this project. Okay, till next time then.